Welcome to SEPSA Talk. I am Evans Apia Kisi. SEPSA, which stands for Center for Better Society, Advocacy and Research Africa. The organization is a non-profit organization which believes in better society for all. We in SEPSA Africa believe that each and everyone deserves a better society. Hashtag Better Society Begins with Me. For more information, check us on YouTube, SEPSA Talk, on Facebook at SEPSA Africa, Twitter, SEPSA Africa, Instagram, SEPSA Africa, and log on to www.sepsaafrica.org. Today, we bring you another interesting discussion on coping with COVID-19 and a future pandemic. In the last 2 decades, the world has battled a number of global pandemics such as HIV/AIDS, SARS, H5N1, MERS, Ebola, Zika, and currently the novel coronavirus COVID-19. As we speak, the COVID-19 has disrupted almost every aspect of our living and raises questions about how prepared governments and society are to address a prolonged infectious disease crisis, particularly in developing countries. The spread of COVID-19 is likely to continue, and the world may have to live with it for some time. The question we seek to address today is, how do we cope with COVID-19 and a future pandemic? We do so by looking at 2 scenarios. And to help us discuss these 2 scenarios, which I will introduce after introducing my panelists. My panelists today include Mrs. Akosua Jima. She's a consultant in healthcare and human rights, researcher and a writer. She lives in Ontario, Canada. In terms of her educational background, she has Master of Social Work at Carleton University, Canada, MA Human Geography and Resources Development at Western University, London. She holds diplomacy and international law from the Lancaster University, England, a BA in Human Resources Development at the University of Ghana. Her expertise includes general internal medicine, gerontology, substitute decisions in healthcare. Mrs. Jima, welcome once again to SEPSA Talk.
Thank you very much. Good to see you all again, Evans, and the rest of the panelists. I'm happy to be here.
Great, and thanks. We are happy again to have you after last week's discussion. The second panelist, which we have today, is Dr. Ishmael Reku. His expertise lies in health and social policy research. He's a policy scientist. He currently works as a policy analyst for the Ministry of Energy and Resources, Government of Saskatchewan, Canada. He holds a PhD in public policy from the Graduate School of Public Policy, University of Saskatchewan, Canada. He holds MA in political science from the Brook University, Ontario, Canada, and has a BA in political science, University of Ghana, Legon. His expertise includes health and social policy, mineral land policy, and elections. Dr. Ishmael Reku, welcome to SEPSA Talk. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and I'm pleased to be on this show. I'm pleased to meet everyone else too. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are also glad to have you. And our last panelist, who is a regular panelist as well, his name is Mr. Edmond Yeboah. He's a research fellow at SEPSA Africa, a doctoral researcher at the Institute of Global Health at the University of Heidelberg, Germany, MSc in Life Science, Economics and Policy from the Technical University of Munich, Germany, Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Sciences from the University of Cape Coast, Ghana. Mr. Edmond Yeboah, welcome once again to SEPSA Talk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans, for having me again on the show. And thank you also to my panelists and also to our lovely viewers.
Great. So viewers, I'm sure you would have a very, very good time with us today. I can promise you that. The kind of panelists that we have put up today, it's awesome. And as I said in my introduction already, we look at how to cope or how to manage and deal with COVID-19. And we construct two scenarios. The first one, which we refer to as the optimistic view. And so with this scenario, what we think or what experts say is that we are all hoping that there would be the development of a vaccine for COVID-19. And the question that we ask all of you, I will start with Dr. Reku Do, is that what should be the coping strategies for different countries, within this short term as we remain very optimistic and hope for the development of a vaccine? So I begin with you, Dr. Reku, and my first question will be that even as we carve the scenario of hoping for the development of a vaccine, so far, what do we know about the development of a COVID-19 vaccine? Is there anything in the pipeline? What is the international community doing as far as the development of a vaccine is concerned? You can unmute your...
Yeah, thanks, Evans. I want to say that this pandemic has actually been a disaster. I mean, it's affecting everybody across the globe, which means that we need a global solution to such a situation. But we know that this is not an easy task. We have had series of viral diseases, and I think you already mentioned some of them. But this is taking a different ramification because of the impact on the economy, social lives, and also even the health system. But we are seeing some improvement in the way we are trying to fight the disease. And we can see in the meantime, when we have no vaccine, countries have taken some measures to prevent and contain the virus. We have also seen measures to help people to cope during this particular time around. But what we have actually seen to be very significant this time around, in fact, compared to most other viral diseases that have occurred in the time before, we have seen that there's a dramatic effort. I mean, various governments, various actors, institutions, domestic, global, are all trying to fight the virus. Not only by using the coping strategy we see now, but also at the level of finding a vaccine. And not that also treatment for those people who have actually contracted the virus so far. So there are good steps. In fact, I'm very optimistic that we are more likely to see a vaccine this time around. I think what is actually making the lead now when it comes to vaccine is Oxford University. I mean, they've developed a vaccine which is called ChAdOx1, okay? And they have developed this vaccine with a goal to make sure that they are able to test, or try it across the world and have a vaccine for the world by September this year. Which will be very miraculous because even HIV/AIDS, we don't have vaccine yet. SARS, there's no vaccine. And all these diseases have no vaccine yet. We are about seeing some kind of vaccine from Oxford University. It has partnered with a multinational pharmaceutical company called Zika, and it is actually trying to produce about 1 million of these vaccines by September. Okay, and I want to say that these are clear examples that possibly we are going to find some vaccine for this virus, and probably this year. What I'm not sure about is whether these vaccines will be able to be distributed across the globe. Okay, especially when we take developing countries, different contexts into consideration, where developing countries, for instance, may not have the necessary resources to be able to get as many of these vaccines for themselves. Because we remember HIV/AIDS vaccine, even treatment was developed around 1987, but it didn't get to countries in Africa for a long time. And I think when it even came, the cost of the vaccine was so outrageous. About $10,000 per year was expected to be spent by each victim. So
maybe quickly, sorry to cut in, but I think that viewers have heard or have got what we were looking for. So you are saying that you sound very optimistic that hopefully by September this year, we might see, the development of a COVID-19 vaccine. I think this is the view that we are all trying to carve. That is what we refer to as the optimistic view. But let me just let you move straight into, if indeed we might be lucky to have a vaccine in September this year, what kind of health policies do you think should be in place to at least cope with the disease until September, if we are likely to have a vaccine?
Until there's vaccine, I will actually encourage that we actually maintain the status quo policies we have so far. I mean, the prevention, containment, limiting the spread, and trying to curtail social gathering. All these are supposed to keep us safe while we wait for vaccine. So until then, the status quo policy must be actually strengthened, must be made sure that we actually improve our health system as well. Okay, because when you look at the whole viruses and when you read the historical information about this, you see that most of the time when these viruses actually occur, the most victims are usually people with underlying conditions, people who have chronic diseases. People who have weakened immune system. So what this means is that if your health system is not actually effective, you are more likely, or even people who do not have access to healthcare in your country, there's the likelihood that the most victim will be in your country, especially when when it comes into your country. So right now, I would say that until we have a vaccine, the existing system or processes, protocols that have been put in place to ensure that people do not contract the disease must be strengthened. We have to have more testing centers as well. We also have to have emergency units, and also PPEs have to be made available. Social distancing have to be improved upon, especially in countries like Africa, where the community, the social system is quite different, okay, and it's quite not conducive for social distancing measures. When until we have vaccine, I expect that most countries and also most health system will have processes in place to ensure that people do not actually come into contact with each other. They have to use the basic protocols, and those are going to help us. But I think one thing I would like to suggest is that it's possible that we may not even have vaccine at all, because
we will come to that. This would be the second scenario which we would maybe look at. So probably you hold on for me, but I will come to you even still, as you say that, well, until the vaccine is developed in September, hopefully, people should stick to the protocols that have been, proposed by the WHO. But I'll come to you and take your take. What advice you would have, or do you know of any best practices? Because the same protocols, I tell you, is not working in some countries. If there are maybe one or two recommendations that you think some countries could learn from, the best practices moving forward until, let's say, September. I come to you, Akosua, and it's the same optimistic view. And we've heard from Dr. Meku that we might be lucky to have a vaccine in September. So this is more of the optimistic view. And I ask you, until September, what kind of governance and leadership role do you think we need to be able to sustain or prevent the spread of this virus moving forward? Because we've seen that there's been a bit of spike, and we had that last week or so from Edmond, when he showed that even in the case of Ghana, the spread seemed to be increasing daily. What would you expect various governments to do to hold us on until September?
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you also to Dr. Reko regarding what the excellent introduction. One of the September thing seems to be quite optimistic because a lot of the other experts also are thinking that probably it would be too optimistic. A couple of scenarios. A significant number of experts are saying that it could probably take up to next year. And a lot of them are putting it at 18 months. And then other experts are also, I was listening to this historian who also said there is also a possibility that there might never be a vaccine either. So I do believe that the governments must be preparing for all these scenarios: a vaccine sooner, a vaccine later, or no vaccine at all. How are they going to deal with it? Your question is, in the meantime, if they're going to have it until then, what are the policies the government should do? First of all, according to the IMF and many other sources, the COVID-19 has had a very significant economic impact on the global economy. They predicted, actually, IMF has projected that the global economy is expected to shrink by 4.9%. They also have said that because of the devastation that COVID has caused on many economies, which is the worst, if not worse, much worse than the economic crisis in 2008. According to them, the devastation is so much that the economies are gonna have to gradually open because they can only hold it so much. So they will have to gradually open. The question is, the opening, as it's been seen in other countries, the moment they open, then there is an increase in the rise of the infections. In my city, for example, we had gone without for a few weeks. We gone zero new infection for a while, but we were just on the stage 2 of the opening. And it appeared as if in the last week, there's been 18 new infections. Throughout the period, the first wave, we only had overall 63. And it stayed like that for a long time. In just in the last few days, I haven't checked for today, but as of yesterday, between the weekend and yesterday, there were 18 new cases. And all of them were traced to a nail salon and spa, where somebody went to do their nails. Before they knew it, a healthcare worker, a restaurant worker, all kinds of people, employees, and now they're tracing it to about 500 customers, plus their families who could have been exposed, and who knows if they went to the grocery store. So I think that in terms of policy, number one, because of the devastation, many of the governments have no choice but to ease back. But some of the policies they're looking at is to collaborate. How are they going to be coming together, sort of merging the private sector and the public sector in order to come together and build the economy? My understanding is that there's going to be reliance on technology. Also, the government needs to build confidence. And it sounds to me that the government with more trust are having people listen to them and comply more than the governments that don't have trust. Also, the government is also pumping more money in terms of having people stay at home. Or I've seen that the Pakistani government, for example, is having people work alternate days, just so then they can limit the number of people in the offices. I think governments are also collaborating more. There's a broader consultation between government, the private sector, as well as other institutions, such as universities. Universities are also consulting with students, faculty, just so then they can collaborate together with students developing technology, how to use the technology. Universities seeking feedback from students as to how online learning is going, some of the challenges, and then universities trying to veer more into online. So in terms of policy, I think there is an effort to limit the number of gathering. And because of the recent outbreak in my city, for example, right now there is a public order from the public health for people, everybody to be wearing masks within all public places that is an enclosure. For example, in offices, public buses, libraries. So any indoors that requires any public gathering, any activity, people are required to be wearing a mask right now. So in terms of policies, if I may to speak, it sounds to me, my feeling is a lot of the governments are going to be operating as if there is no vaccine, and it sounds to me as Dr. Reko said, even if there's going to be a vaccine, I was listening to Bill Gates, who said some of the logistical challenges are huge. In fact, they expect that even if there's going to be a vaccine, they expect that they may produce, once they open it for manufacturing, in the first few weeks, they could only produce about 100,000 or so. And then these 100,000 would be competed for by millions of people. So to me, whether we have a vaccine or not, there's going to be months whereby people will go without, whereby the economy still have to function. Because of that, I think there is more around online businesses, online operations, whether it is government offices, institutions, or any other people operating in that manner. Then wearing of masks and social distancing within is encouraged, as well as government supporting, so then people don't have to gravitate in the workplace at the same time. As I mentioned, Pakistani governments and other places are alternating. So they're reducing the number of hours at work, as well as alternating, so like 2 days a week. So those kinds of things are things that I think we're going to be seeing. The problem, though, is the government or countries that cannot support people to do the alternate, as well as Dr. Reko said. I think that in some of these poorer countries, the population density is one of the other problems there, because if people are staying indoors, I think they cannot afford to do the social distancing. And here in Canada, I was listening to the Monk debate, which is based in the University of Toronto. What they said was, even people that live in Canada in low-income communities that also live in high-rise buildings, they cannot afford to do social distancing. And if they're elderly and poor, and people are going in there to give them care, that means it's a small enclosure, small apartment, and a high-rise building, whereby, especially if there is no air conditioning. So those are some of the other, I think, the major challenges that many governments will be facing. But otherwise, a move to the use of technology, effective governance, more collaboration, and transparent governments. I think that those are some of the approaches the governments, and more support to small businesses would be the shift around it. So technology, effective communication, broader communication with all sectors, and meeting of minds to figure out how they may deal with it, and social distancing measures. I think those are the things that would be happening, except for the poorer countries, as I mentioned.
Yeah, thank you. You already touched on a few strategies that you would expect various governments to put in place, in this short term that we hope for the development of the vaccine. And I like the intervention that I'll come to you, Dr. Reku, for you to, because I also was a bit puzzled when you said in September, but I'm happy that there's another argument that experts are saying if we are lucky, we might have it by mid of next year instead. And I would like you to react to that. But before that, Mrs. Jima, I wanted to ask you what you think, any kind of recommendations, because you mentioned Bill Gates already said, even if a vaccine is developed, let's say mid next year, developing countries might struggle getting it because of, we know there are different institutional endowments here and there. But what exactly would you expect them to be doing from now until, let's say, if there's a vaccine is developed, just for them to be able to get hold of some of these vaccines? What would be your take on that in just a minute?
It's my understanding that Bill Gates has also is collaborating with some of the best logistical experts from Amazon as well as from the military to build strategic distribution centers or factories just to help in some of these. I think that with Bill Gates, his focus is also on poorer countries, more so because of the problems that, for one, the poorer countries don't have the financial reserve to keep their economies still. They can also not hold people indoors for a long time because they can't replace their income. And many of those developing countries rely on informal economy. Because of that, the people cannot afford to stay home and get any benefits. They can't get it from the government. They can't get it from an employer because many of them are self-employed. Because of that, and then they live in very crowded neighborhoods with poor sanitation as well. Because of that, I think that the focus is, there's a debate that when the vaccines are out, there's a concern that the bigger countries may compete and outpace the poorer countries. So I think organizations like the Gates Foundation are more focused around helping the developing countries have access to that more than the richer countries.
And then I also hope that with what you have said with Bill Gates and others trying to help to develop more distribution centers, I hope the developing world, in particular African leaders, can also come together to put up a strategy for that. Dr. Reku, I just wanted to hear your take on mid next year, because you sounded very optimistic saying that by September we could have a vaccine.
Yeah, thank you, Evans. I think that when it comes to even vaccine development, okay, I think existing knowledge and information shows that the actual time to do vaccine development is around 15 to 20 years. Okay, so even the 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years, all these are still optimistic. I mean, yes, everybody is quite optimistic. But I think I see some reasons why we should be optimistic. I mean, for this one around. I think that this time around, we have seen widespread involvement of all actors, okay, trying to find solution to this vaccine, to this virus, okay. And we have seen that not only in developed countries, we are seeing the same measures being done even in developing countries. Even herbalists are trying to find solution to this virus. Back home in Ghana, in some places in Africa, I mean, everybody is trying to find solution to this virus. Second point is that, okay, I mean, there have been significant funding geared towards finding solutions to the virus. In fact, recently, United States of America actually provided about 1.2 billion in support of development of a vaccine. Of course, now Oxford has been identified as the lead one because there are 4 stages of vaccine development, especially on human after developing the vaccines. Trying it takes about 4 stages. I think Oxford is about the 3rd stage, and it is doing that across the world. It's doing so in South Africa. It is doing so in Brazil, in the UK, and it's trying to make sure that we expedite action on this vaccine. Point
well made. So I get the sense that it's because of the massive, cooperation and, massive amassing of wealth and money into the development of the vaccine. That's why you sound very optimistic. Thank you very much. Edmund.
But Evans, yes. before you move on, it's not only just the support for this vaccine, but also we have seen that this virus, coronavirus, is similar to most of the other viruses we have experienced, like, I mean, the ones that cause SARS, okay, the one that caused MERS, remember in 2014 in Middle East, okay, we have seen that they are similar. And also researchers have seen that the rate at which it mutates, that is, it changes, is not as fast as those other viruses. And also, because we have experience trying to develop vaccine for these other viruses before, and we were not successful, researchers are actually building on ideas on the work they did already. Okay, so like Oxford research, for instance, it's not new. It's just they have the foundation already, but they are just building upon it now. And given the amount of support they are having right now, in fact, as at now, Oxford is even trying to produce or manufacture the vaccine alongside the trial, because so far the tests seem to be positive. And that's the reason why I'm quite optimistic, okay, when it comes to getting a vaccine for this one.
Thank you very much. So Edmond, I think it's now clear now with the submission from Ishmael now, I prefer to call him Ishmael now, so that if we see previous knowledge abounds, there's a lot of, collaborative effort from both the global north and the global south. So for you also, if indeed we might get it even in September or mid next year, what do you think various governments, what do you expect them to be doing in terms of their socio-economic policies to help us cope with the virus until hopefully a vaccine is developed?
Thank you very much. So what we've had already is the optimistic view that hopefully a vaccine will be developed. I'm new to the fact that it could be this year, because as far as I know, the expectation out there was supposed to be the middle of next year. And let's not forget that the middle of next year that we are talking about is when the vaccine will be ready to be administered. However, it doesn't include when the vaccine will be completely administered. One thing we have to clearly understand is that it will take a long time. Even if we go with the first scenario that in 18 months we have a vaccine, it will still take a long time before we can vaccinate everybody. We're talking about more than 7 billion people on this planet to have the level of immunity that we are all looking for. And until we get to that level, for sure, the world will never be the same, because there is no point in the US vaccinating everybody in the US. However, Ghana is not vaccinating, or Ghana hasn't covered that much, and there is still the restriction that somebody from Ghana cannot travel to the US, because if that happens, then you transport the virus from Ghana to US. So the point at which the world or the globe needs to be before we say things have come to normal, even if I want to go with the optimistic view, I think it will still take us a couple of years to get to that point. We are all praying and we are all hoping that we get a vaccine. I'm not playing the pessimistic guy here, but I hope we do find a vaccine. But what we are experiencing at the moment when it comes to socio-economics, or maybe let me focus on the economic aspect, is that at the moment we've been hit by this virus so hard that global economy is crawling. We are on the canvas trying to figure out what is happening, because the IMF is trying to compare this pandemic to what Mrs. Jima said, that it might be greater than the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, and even compared to the Great Depression during the 1930s. And if you look at the current figures right now, you see that global trade figures have declined in double figures for all parts of the world. So be developed, be developing, we are all at the moment struggling badly, and economic growth is regressing stunningly. So the objective is now how to cushion the economy through the shock, or prospectively how to recover from this shock with less effort. And if I want to zoom in on Sub-Saharan Africa, and to be specific in Ghana, we have a problem, because the problem we have is that most of our economies are export commodity sensitive economies. And the major part of the economies, or the major part of global trade affected, are commodity prices. And so these economies are struggling. And the figures out there say that before the pandemic, the sub-region was growing at a rate of 3.6, and now it's ranging from 1.5 to 2.5. And it should tell you that the growth is coming backwards, and it's something that we have to be worried about. And in this short term, what approach do we need? For me, the key strategy will be boosting resilience through fiscal and monetary policies, because the economy is hit, industries are struggling. This virus has disrupted the flow of goods as well as people. One of the most effective strategies to deal with the virus is social distancing. And when you social distance, it means you reduce the number of people. When you reduce the number of people, you create a lot of bottlenecks. So Companies are operating at half, quarter. In some cases, they are not operating at all. So it has affected the demand and also the supply of products. And that's why things have come to a standstill. And that's why we are expecting a recession, probably. And how do we deal with this? Or how have people tried to deal with it? And if you look at developed countries or other countries, they've done this by compensating income losses through social support system to kind of stimulate demand and also keep the supply afloat. However, if you look at our subcontinent, it's very difficult to deploy such a measure because we don't have it. We don't have a social protection system in place. I stand to be corrected, but I don't know if there is a social protection system anywhere on the continent. And the closest Ghana have come to is this tax exemption, but only for health workers, and 50% increment of salary only for frontliners, and insurance package also for health workers. And then what we did was that we brought this temporary relief on utility consumption. So these are short-term approach, or these are short-term things we are trying to apply on a large scale to see if it can cushion our economy, if it can pull this economy through this moment. It's a test of resilience. And there is also another strategy other countries are using by providing survival packages to businesses in the form of tax reliefs, favorable loans, and bailouts. And I don't know about the sub-region, but I know about Ghana that they try to roll out this Corona Elevation Program, where they are now trying to pump 1 billion cedis to households, to small and medium-scale businesses, and like about 3 billion cedis in the industries to try to salvage some of the losses that we might encounter during this period. They also did reduce the policy rate to 1.5, did reduce the reserve requirement for banks by 2%, and they've tried to reduce interest rate also by 2%, and trying to come up with measures such as 6 months moratorium for principal repayment for the hospitality industry, soft loan of about 600 million with 1 year moratorium and 2 year repayment period for micro, small, and medium scale businesses, going as far as touching Momo transactions to try and reduce the cost of transaction to relieve the people. But I would say these are short measures that were deployed in the neck of the pandemic. But given the prognosis and given what we are talking about, if a virus is, if a vaccine is found middle of next year, it means we still have a long way to go. And if you look at the day-to-day new cases that we are having in Ghana, there are no signs of decrease.
And you mentioned about, we having a very long way to go. And I still come back to the question, do you think developing countries would be able to deal with it? Because it appears to me at the moment, most of the stimulus packages that were, as you also said, only very few selected, workers received it. And I even have information that they've not even received the top up and so on. But beyond that, because it appears developing countries are not able to keep up, what else can they do within this short term, even with an optimistic view?
So within this short term, even with an optimistic view, optimistic in my terms will be 3 years, because I expect us to have a vaccine in a year's time, like a fully produced, prepared vaccine with high efficacy. One thing we should not forget is that it's science that we are doing, and we can take the example of HIV/AIDS. For more than 30 years, we are struggling to find a vaccine that's efficacious, not just a vaccine, but a vaccine that does work. And that's the challenge. So there have been numerous vaccines that have been produced in the past with promising stats, yet it never materialized because at different points you see it couldn't do the work it should be doing. And at the moment I read somewhere 2018 that the closest we've come to is 31% efficacy, and that's the RV144 vaccine, HIV/AIDS. So I'm not being pessimistic here. Again, I want to be very optimistic because we all want the world to return back to normal and things return to normal. It means we have some years ahead of us and we need to think in that direction. And what I would propose in the case of developing countries that can cut across and benefit a wide range of people would be reduction of duty and import taxes, because these economies are so much import driven. To this point, much of the things consumed in these countries are imported. And when you don't have social system where you can directly inject money into the economy, what you can do is to stimulate the economy through reduction in prices. And one way is to take what kind of spike the prices. In the case of Ghana, import and duty taxes. Also, you can reduce interest rate further. I think the government pronounced a 2% interest rate reduction, which for me, I think this is quite small. We can do better because we are talking about in the next 3 years, many young businesses have been crushed. Many businesses are suffering. They are on the floor right now. We are talking about informal sector where you cannot properly document it or know to a full extent the damage caused. But surely there are huge damages caused in this area. And one way to kind of boost or push them is to give them soft loans or loans with better interest rate. Imagine the average interest rate in Ghana is like 20%, 22%. So even if you reduce it by 2%, it's like 19%. And compared to other countries, that's so much. So if we really want to, in this period, put up an economy that is resilient to the shocks that we are seeing, then we need to further reduce the interest rate in order to allow these informal businesses to quickly come back and stand on their feet.
Thank you very much. And before we go to the second scenario, I said I was going to ask Ishmael to, because he, in a way, summarized that in moving forward with an optimistic view, countries should endeavor to stick to the protocols of the WHO. And I asked that there are some countries that are still not doing well, and we know other countries are doing well. What do you think the developing countries that are mostly lagging behind, what do you think they could learn from those that are doing very well?
You know, yeah, Evans, I don't know, but I think it is sometimes some of the things we think developing countries are not doing well. Sometimes I think so, but I don't think developing countries are necessarily not doing well when it comes to trying to address this viral disease. Okay, I think maybe in terms of the economy, how developing countries are able to support people to cope during this pandemic is problematic. But I think the effort, at least at the level of the health system, to address the COVID-19 virus, I don't think developing countries are doing bad at all. Okay, I mean, when you look at Ghana, you know, even though we are seeing some high levels of COVID-19 cases, you know, it's not different from what is happening in the United States. Okay, United States is actually experiencing higher levels and increasing levels. Sometimes we may attribute this to maybe the Black Lives Matter protests here and there. But of course, that may be a factor. But I mean, at the end of the day, the levels at which they are being impacted or being affected by this virus is not really better than what Ghana is doing, what many African countries are doing. I think we are doing well. And for that matter, I would say that, you know, African countries are supposed to continue, I mean, with what they are doing. Social distancing, there are some of them that may be economically challenging, especially getting like the enough tests being done. Okay, it's a problem because even in the Western world and the high income countries, we still see that they still don't have enough. But it will be a challenge, but I don't think it necessarily means we are not doing well. I mean, we have to try to improve our effort, trying to partner with all the other sectors, especially the local actors. I mean, private sector, trying to manufacture masks, you know, trying to help. But I think one thing we should also do is the online system of maybe doing things, okay, of the economy. Even at the health level, you know, people must not necessarily go to the hospital to see the doctor. Okay, people should be able to have online system of telemedicine. You know, these are some innovations that are helping. And in other places, maybe developing countries have to try to, I mean, improve their effort in those areas. Okay. But generally, I think the policies have been the same, the outcome has been the same. There may be different levels of challenge, but I don't think developing countries are doing any less better.
Very well, very well. Thank you very much. So I will go straight to the second scenario, and I'll start with Akosua. And thank you, my panelists, for what you have shared so far regarding a very, very optimistic, view. And I think you have spelled out the strategies very well. Notably coming from Ishmael would be to follow the WHO protocols in terms of health policies. Akosua also telling us that there's, in terms of at the governance level, there should be more collaboration, there should be reliance on the use of technology. Ishmael also touched on that. And then Edmond, in terms of social and economic policies, he feels that when we boost the local economy and observe social distancing and help to, reduce import taxes and also reduction in interest rates will help. Now I come to the pessimistic view. I agree that there are similar strategies to some extent, but now we want to look at it as if we are living, or we're going to live with COVID-19 just as we have lived with HIV/AIDS for over 30 years, which has also been mentioned already. And then the question is, if we would live with the virus just like HIV/AIDS, what should we be doing? What should the world be doing? And I start with you, Akosua, in terms of governance and leadership strategies. What kind of long-term measures would you expect various governments to put in place to live with the virus, even though we are not hoping for that anyway?
Thank you very much, if you can hear me well. And thank you to the other panelists for sharing a different perspective and in a very in-depth manner. I think that we all can attest that this COVID-19 has brought, people expect that it is going to be changing the way we live in society. Some of the changes, there is a debate that some of it, we may never go back to certain ways we did things. And then some of them also feel, some other experts also feel the manner, the impact it's had on our lives. Some things, even if they may be reverted to the old ways, it might take time. Because as we know, we already talked about the economy, but we also know that it has had such an impact in terms of unemployment, in terms of health, and even the way in which we're going to be seeking health, it's also impacted. So in other words, for me, I'm a realist, and I'm operating under the fact that even if there's going to be a vaccine, it might take several months. And there is a possibility we may never find a vaccine, and that thought is also there. Or regardless of whether we find a vaccine, people feel certain things may never come back. For example, the manner in which we do businesses. There are debates around whether universities are even going to be able to come back, whether, for one, if it's going to take several months. Some of their schools have lost several months. Particularly in the developing world, they've lost several months of school. Unlike here, whereby kids could still do a little bit of online, in developing countries, they couldn't afford it because of internet issues, because of other logistical issues about learning. So regardless, education is several months behind. And plus, we have to absorb cohorts that it's already probably lagging behind. And then let's even say they were able to cope in Canada here, where kids were able to finish high school by online school. A lot of the kids didn't find it the same. But it also appears at the same time that education is going to go online for several months. And so there is a need for adoption of technology, regardless of whether there's going to be a vaccine, because of the time it would take for almost everybody to get vaccinated, or if there will be a vaccine. So all I'm saying is the world will change forever in so many ways. The way we conduct business, the way we access healthcare, the way we do education, the way we work. it's all gonna change. As I mentioned, some aspects are gonna be changing. So I think there is an advice also that because of the devastation on small businesses, the government has no choice but to support. So there is also a thought that the whole idea about austerity measures, small government, I think the world is going to change from that aspect to move more towards bigger government, because now there is a realization that government's role is very important. As pre-COVID, whereby, especially in the advanced world or in many parts of the world, where IMF and the World Bank was sort of driving how economies should be run. I think that there is a need for good governance, as well as a commitment for government to also offer help, government to improve healthcare, because when this COVID happened, we can all see that the states that have done well versus the states that haven't done well, there's a thought that what was existing is now more exacerbated, because if the government, for example, or the state had poor infrastructure, now you can see that those countries are suffering some more. If they invested poorly in healthcare, now the healthcare system is suffering some more. If the country was the country that didn't really invest in educational infrastructure, now they're going to be suffering. So essentially what I'm saying is, moving forward, there is a need for investment in more technology, more online tools, just for people to access education, to be able to still work whilst the virus is there, whereby observing social distancing. And so there's a move for more online or more technologically based kind of communication, interaction, in terms of how businesses are going to be functioning, conferences and meetings, moving more towards online technologies such as Zoom that we're using right now. So there's going to be more of that. Even some of the government function is going to be moving online. As I mentioned, universities and schools moving online. So there's a need for those infrastructural investment to happen across board. And I think developing countries, although Dr. Reko feels they're doing well, but I think there is a need for a change in attitude, just so they can catch up. There is a need to improve housing in those countries so people can have decent housing, because as we know, COVID-19 sort of almost outshone how poorer conditions could actually be affecting health. So right now, we see that social services is very linked to health. So if you have poor social infrastructure, poor social programs, poor housing, and poor incomes, because as we also learned, whether it is here or whether it's in poor countries, we can see that the poorer people are suffering some more. If even in advanced countries, poorer communities, poorer groups are disproportionately affected. So essentially, I think that besides an investment in infrastructure or communication, I think there has to be a need for government to invest in these sectors: housing, improving human conditions. I think there has to be those kinds of things in order to cope. Government has to, as I mentioned already, collaborate with businesses some more to be able to. There also has to be, I do believe developing countries as well as advanced countries also have to probably upscale their testing. They also have to be using some technology to track people. So then people that in areas of cluster areas, to me, that has to be detected sooner. So then they can sort of quarantine those areas and treat it and contain or maybe test all those people, rather than letting it go and having people infecting people across communities. I think that has to also happen.
Thank you very much. But you mentioned something that I wanted clarification. When you say bigger governments, you said you expect that in the long term, I mean, we would have bigger governments. Were you referring to investment in infrastructure as bigger governments, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
More because for many years, especially since the 1980s, I think the emphasis has been the promotion of the private sector and government also staying away from the provision of public services, whereby there has been offloading of public health, offloading of many government services, and putting more on individuals. And I think what has happened in the last couple of years is this has actually expanded the disparities, income disparities, human conditions are also linked to these income disparities, as well as a disparity in socioeconomic conditions. So what is going to be happening is now increasingly, we all know that because we are so connected, now this illness is showing that across the globe, whether you live in a developing country or you live in an advanced country, we're all connected. So then an illness or a disease not well controlled because of poor infrastructure in an African country may be well connected because of the speed at which this can travel, because of the travel by airplanes and stuff like that, people moving across. In the same manner, within the country, we know that you just can't say these poor people are living in these communities. Their poor housing is linked to your health. So I think there is a move, a shift in sort of mindset that government should be doing more for poor communities. And the advanced countries should be also paying attention towards developing world so they can help improve their infrastructures as well as their economies. So they can also help their people in this manner. So essentially what I'm saying is there is a push right now that there is a need for governments, whether here or across the globe, to invest more, to be a bit more involved. The importance of government is now being increasingly more emphasized. That's what I mean by it. So the presence of government, involvement of government, more collaboration, government supporting businesses, as well as government supporting individuals, as well as particularly most vulnerable people, the poor, because they could contract an illness and essentially move into the market, and then it can spread to the whole community. So that's what I mean by government investing some more.
Thank you very much. I will come to you maybe later for your final thoughts on the way forward, in the expectation of the next pandemic. But Edmond, also the same scenario, the pessimistic view where we would live with the virus just like we have lived with HIV/AIDS. And even you also already started the discussion around that line when you show a rather, I would say, a very low optimistic view of 3 or 4 years before we might get a proper vaccine. But taking it up from what Akosua said regarding governance as, more investment, collaboration, and she also talked a lot about technology. Now, what kind of social and economic policies from the line of investment, what would you expect governments to be doing for the very poor communities, of course, but you look at it from a broader perspective, what you expect them to be doing. But I would love if you touch more on what you would expect or what you would propose to the government to do for poorer communities, but also within even the developed countries. As we know, not everybody is rich and there are others who seem to be affected more than others. So for the long-term measures, what would you propose or what would you expect to be done?
Well, thank you very much. And I think, like Akosua have rightly said, as some writers would put or argue that this virus, irrespective of the negative aspect of it, is creating a new world. And we have to accept the fact that it is opening our eyes to things that ought to be changed, but we were slow to change it. And I think the key strategy here, I put it 3. What we need is sustainable resilience, robust economy, and self-reliance. What do I mean by these 3? I break it into 4 points so that we can understand what I mean by these 3. Like Akosua said, we need strategic investments. We need investment in critical resources and infrastructure. And this is a push. This is a push where countries, it doesn't matter the scale or the size, developing to all invest in critical infrastructure and resources. And you are asking me, how do we tackle the poor? The poor benefit from the resources and the infrastructure of the country. So the better the resources and more distributed and fairly distributed they are, the more the poor can participate in the economy. Let's talk about digitalization. I think one of the things that should happen is rapid digitalization to expand and open new sectors of the economy and to expand and open new areas of the country. Because at the moment, not just in developing countries, but developed countries, you have only few spots where you have, for example, fast internet, the rest really struggling. And if you take this to developing countries, it is worse. But we've come to understand that if you want to take part in the global trade and in the global economy, then you need to be digitalized in order to connect yourself to it. And I feel like this pandemic has given us more reason, or it has triggered why we need to invest so heavily in digitalizing the economy. The old way of living, in my opinion, is long, long overdue. There needs to be a new way. There needs to be a new economy, maybe economy 5.0, which is more digitalized. Because from this, you can derive the fact that we also need to change the way we even arrange our working conditions. It would affect economic industries in a way that we can be able to create flexible working systems. One of the things that we've seen in countries that are bouncing back so strong in this period, like Germany and other developed countries, is that because they have this digital infrastructure, for example, I take myself, I can stay home and get all the work done. I don't need to go to the office. Why? Because there is strong internet, there is that technology to support and help you. Yes, we are saying schools are closed. However, the impact is not much felt here because lectures and classes were done online. People were learning how to play instruments online. These were infrastructures that were laid, and in this period, they became very beneficial for the country. And so moving forward, these are some of the infrastructures that developing countries can look at it and say, with a long-term view, we need to invest in these infrastructures, because should another pandemic hit us, these are the very infrastructures that we will need in order to cope with it. And I would also touch on expansion of domestic capability and economic diversification. I mentioned it in my first submission when I was touching on the short-term approach, that most of the economies in developing countries, they are export commodity sensitive, in that they rely on cocoa, they rely on gold, they rely on oil and minerals in the raw form. Now, when the prices shoot down, it means the economies are also shut down along with it. So how do we move forward? How do we use this opportunity to propel ourselves into a new realm, like a new way we can see growth models, a new way in which we can see economic models? They need to switch. Economies need to be switched from export commodity oriented to more value added commodities, where you create value added products locally and also globally. Because if you take the example of Ghana, if we don't find a way of converting our cocoa into something that will benefit the local economy and the global economy, and if we keep on exporting the beans, now nothing can move. Today I went to the post office to send some things to families back home, and they told me, sorry, because of the COVID-19, you cannot send these things. You have to wait. And I think it has affected many transfers in that regard. So if your economy is built solely on exporting things and now you cannot export them, it means your economy has no means of shielding itself or cushioning itself against these shocks that we are experiencing. And we also have to concentrate on homegrown solutions. It falls under the key strategy of self-reliance. I'm speaking specifically to emerging or developing economies, that they need to be reliant, especially in food production. There are so many areas that we can improve on. There are so many areas that we can look into ourselves. We can use this window, because let's understand that this is a closed window. Now, things that you cannot simply import them into the country because the important countries are locked down. Now, let's use this opportunity to develop solutions. Like in Ghana, we did it. We developed PPEs. We developed hand washing solutions. And everyone was so happy, and we were saying necessity is the mother of all invention. Now let's use the same approach to also develop other sectors of the economy and come up with homegrown solutions so that moving forward, if this COVID will stay with us like HIV has stayed with us for 30 years, we can at least say we can support or we can supply the basic need of our own people. So that's what I think must happen. If I want to go quickly, we need strategic financial sector reforms. You have to shield some companies. You need new regulations to bail out some companies. You need new regulations to restructure your economy. You need to invest in critical infrastructure and resources. We need to rapidly digitalize, and now, not only in terms of industries, but in terms of government processes in our education, switch to virtual learning. We need to expand our domestic capability, and we need to diversify our economy and move it from this export commodity-driven economy to a more value-added economy where you can satisfy your own local demand.
We said, thank you very much. Certainly we need that. I mean, and I like the points you touched on also with my background. We need to move away from this export-driven economy to a more value-added economy. So Ishmael, I come to you now. In the long term, what do you expect? What would you propose to various governments to be doing in terms of their health policies? What do we need to do to be able to cope with COVID-19 if we're going to live with it forever?
Evans, thank you. I think my co-panelists have said a lot, but I think what this actually coronavirus has taught the world and not of us, and I think some researchers have actually been saying this for a long time, is the interrelationship between health and the economy. Okay, and so we see that, I mean, as a result of this COVID-19, the whole economy of the world has collapsed in some way. In fact, we know countries are spending, even in developed countries where there's huge expenditure. I mean, they are taking on a lot of debt this year. And so we are expecting a dramatic fall in the economic position of the world. But, you know, we should look at it, and that's what my parents have said, the basic or the underlying cause of, or the underlying reason why some people are responding or even addressing the problem better than others is because of the economy, you know, and also how the entire system, economic system, health system, how your study scope has actually been. Is it strong, weak? So if your system is, existing system is weak, I mean, your ability to cope with the virus is actually weak. I mean, as a result, because there's a strong relationship there. So, like they've said, we have to build upon our system. And if I'm to talk about just the health system, what I think we should be doing as a health system is to run the health system in a new way. And I think the others have said it, we have to move to technology. Okay, we have to move to technology. It's the way out now. If not for technology, some of us wouldn't have gone to work. Okay, at the time the virus was at its height, everybody had to go home. I have been working from home since. Okay, and yet we're developing policy, trying to change regulations in order to support. I work for the mining sector, you know, Ministry of Energy and Resources. We have to give some kind of easement, some kind of relief for mining companies, oil and gas companies, because price of oil has fallen. Some of them have to pay leases, or they have to pay rent, have to pay royalty, have to undertake some exploratory project, and all of them had to stop that. And as a result, okay, we had to develop policy trying to look for options to support them. You cannot do this in developing countries. And the reason is because our economy is weak. Okay, we don't even have the reserve to be able to do so. Okay, so that's one thing. So we have to try and move from our basic system or way of doing things, like primary production of primary resources. We should also look into technology. I know this government, especially in Ghana, Baomia has been leading a lot of IT interventions. I think it's a good thing. We should try to move this on to the health system, trying to make sure that, you know, people can have access to healthcare, they can see their doctor, even on phone or even via Zoom, whatever. We have to make sure that we do certain things like that. And also, we have to move towards attaining universal coverage. You know, this mantra of universal coverage has been going on for so long, especially Ghana started even earlier, but the World Health Organization started advocating for universal coverage from 2005. Okay, Ghana started with the National Health Insurance Scheme around 2003. 2005, we have had a nationwide implementation of the National Health Insurance Scheme. And one of the goals of the health insurance scheme was to make sure that we attain universal health coverage within 5 years. Okay, we are now in 2020, okay, and that was in 2003, 2005. We still do not have universal access to healthcare. Okay, access to health insurance is about 36% of the population. Okay, in developing countries, in all, you say that out-of-pocket payment is still the largest chunk, okay, of the sources of funding for healthcare, which means that a lot of people are paying for healthcare out of their pocket. The challenge is that people who do not have the funding are not able to access healthcare, which put them vulnerable at any kind of infections or viruses that may emerge, including the COVID-19. Okay, and so we have to make sure that we strive for universal coverage, making healthcare accessible to everybody without the person having to suffer because they pay for their healthcare. Okay, so we have to do that. And also, we should try to do extensive public education if we are supposed to live with this virus. Okay, we must maximize the level with which we are educating people about this COVID-19. You know, I've been hearing that if you take alcohol, you are better off with this viruses. You know, these are not true. Okay, we need to try to sensitize the public that, you know, this virus is very contagious, deadly, and that if you don't protect yourself, if you don't follow the protocols we have lined up, you are going to have it. In fact, when HIV came, okay, I know Ghana did a lot of education, and I think it's one of the reasons why the infection rate in Ghana is very low. It's about 1.6 or so. It's very low compared to other African countries like South Africa. You know, it's very low in Ghana because of the education we gave to the public. You remember the ABC education, okay? Abstain from sex, okay? Be faithful, okay? And then also use condom. You know, those were some of the catchy phrases that helped with the education at the time. I think if you are going to live with COVID-19, we have to come up with some innovative, campaign strategies, trying to make sure that the public really understand the contagious and the endemic nature of this disease. Otherwise, we are going to have another, kind of lockdown. You know, people don't like lockdown. I do not like lockdown. But as a policy analyst, I think all options are there. They are in the toolkit. Depending on the nature of the situation, lockdown could be triggered. Okay, if you don't understand the nature of the disease, we see that it's spreading beyond the expectation or our control. Lockdown is the policy option, and that it could happen.
Let me ask you, because I think you are the one who also touched on the issue of, is it herbal medicine? I know in this point, Edmond has already touched on having a lot of homegrown policies moving into line of, I don't want to say domestication or anything like that, but what's your take also on, moving forward, if we, in terms of our health policies, you've mentioned health insurance, which is very important, but what's your view on our traditional kind of medicine? Because you touched on in the earlier submission, what would you expect to happen?
Yeah, I think good for bringing this up. You know, we have to, I think the best strategy for every country at this time around, okay, especially developing country with weak economy, is to make sure that we look for very cost-effective way of addressing this problem. You know, we can always talk about, do that, build more hospital or do everything, but it all depends on how much you have. So we should look at very innovative, cost-effective ways of addressing it. And using our traditional medicine is one of the ways we can actually sail through this viral infections more cost effectively. Okay, and so one of the first papers I wrote was trying to integrate herbal medicine with modern medicine, and I think that it helps. There are instances that people have used it. Grandparents have used it. Some of us, when we were kids, actually had some of these things administered to us, and they did actually work. Okay, the good thing is that now we have some kind of protocols to make sure that whatever they do is safe. Okay, whatever they do is effective and it doesn't affect. So we have this board that has been set up to make sure that this thing actually works. So I'm going to say that we should integrate our traditional medicine into this actually processes if we want to actually address the problem of COVID-19. Well. And it's going to help us a lot. It's very cost effective. No, it doesn't require too much resource because we don't have to import. We don't have to study the impact of our exchange rate, We don't have to look at all those because we have it. And if we are able to actually use them, we encourage them to produce more. And when they are able to do so, they get a lot of capital. They are able to even improve upon their technology. And by the time we are exporting this. In fact, I've been seeing some of these masks that people are wearing. Okay, even right here to protect themselves from COVID-19. And it will surprise you. Some of them look exactly the same as those ones we are producing in Ghana. Okay, the masks we have here. And I saw some of them. I said, we have the capacity. We can do a lot. And we can do it cheaply. And this is where we should be looking at in order to fight this virus going forward.
Thank you very much, Ishmael. And thank you very much to the others as well. I think this is how far time would allow us to. I had another question, but unfortunately, we would have to end here. So rather, I would give each of you a minute or two on your final words, as far as the strategies of living with COVID-19 is concerned. So I start with you, Edmond. Just a word or two.
Okay, so my final words will be, now we've seen the link between health and economy. And undoubtedly, if you don't take good care of your health system, then your economic system is also going to crash. Vice versa, if you don't take good care of your economic system, then when there is such a situation like a pandemic, you'll be the worst affected. So one thing I would like to say is we need to make health policies, and we need to invest in these health policies. It's not just enough to make the policies, but also to invest in these policies. And if you ask me about how to tackle a future pandemic, then I would say, let's make health policies. Let's invest in simulating these health policies. Because I'm of the view that if you calculate the economic cost of simulating a pandemic emergency plan for 30 years, even without any pandemic, the cost of that simulation will be way, 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 way less than 6 months economic losses due to a pandemic. And we have to take the digitalization very seriously, because now we've come to understand how pandemics can stop the whole world from running. And in those moments, we rely on existing connectivity systems to operate and to bring back the economy slowly and cushion it against a major fall. Hopefully, should we find a vaccine in the middle of next year or 30 years to come, what every government wants to achieve is a recovery with much less damage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edmond. Akosua, your final take on, again, just what you would tell various governments as far as these two scenarios. And Edmond already touched on a question I didn't want to go into it, but also if you could chip in what we should be doing in preparation for a next pandemic, though I am sounding a bit like a prophet of doom here, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually am a realist, so I think that's the right thing to do. It's always good to plan. And I always say illnesses and diseases are part of life because it could come from everywhere. It could come from a biological thing. It could also come from even an exposure, especially in Ghana, whereby there is mining, there is exposure to mercury. So an illness and planning for a pandemic is a way of planning for the future to guard against it. In fact, I do believe that there's a lot of lessons learned because in the last couple of years, I think the emphasis has been on globalization and interdependency, and the world is shrinking, and social media and technology. And I think many people thought globalization and interconnectivity would solve all the problems and would lift everybody up. And once we all have the technology, we're going to go forward. But this illness has also shown their disparity. It's actually outed it some more as to how we live in a globally connected world, but at the same time, even within the same country or within the same global space, there is a difference. So the places that have done well and have done without, such as Vietnam, South Korea, New Zealand, Iceland, Germany, that have done well, are the places that have effective governance. They have more efficient healthcare system, effective leaders that are trusting, that have always supported their healthcare, supported social infrastructure. What has happened is the countries that are more suppressing, more of neglectful of their poor have suffered the most. And the countries that have also behaved like more of strong countries, such as Russia and USA, and all these countries that are more of for the rich, there's vast disparity, have also suffered the most in this pandemic. So I think the lesson is for countries to also examine globally what is it that went wrong, because again, I always say it's not a matter of whether there was ever going to be a pandemic. Everybody knows this is historically has been the case. It has happened every couple of years.
Thank you.
I think that going forward, the country should be evaluating what happened and then adapting to the new life around the infrastructure we talked about. I also do think that countries like Africa, they should also be looking at storage facilities to actually preserve food and conserve them, so then they can reduce their importation. And maybe in case people are not able to go and farm some more, so they should also actually invest in those facilities besides technology that we talked about. And I think that they should also be looking at investing in housing and sanitation in their countries.
Thank you.
Then they can
thank you very much,
minimize future impact.
Final words to you, Ishmael. In terms of health policies, what would you say, and especially in preparation for the next pandemic?
Yeah, I think that I want to emphasize that even though I'm quite optimistic we can have a vaccine against this virus, I think that the best strategy for every government at this time is to be cautiously optimistic. You know, you should be cautiously optimistic because there is no guarantee that all this effort will necessarily lead to the expected vaccine. So every government's approach, and that would be my advice to every government, okay, even in the developing world, is to be cautiously optimistic about it. Okay, we should be optimistic, but we should be cautious so that we also look at other dimensions of our society. And the second thing I'm going to talk about is to make sure that, okay, we don't lose sight of the fact that we are fighting this virus in order to make sure that we overcome it. That should be our focus. Even if we find a vaccine against COVID-19, I think government should make sure that the necessary protocols we have put in place already, okay, trying to curtail the virus, is not actually dismissed at all. We shouldn't even look at it that way. I know during the lockdown, some people were sharing food and others were crowded. Those were times that, I mean, we think that some of the people could be infected. I think even when there's vaccine for us to administer, we should make it in such a way that we don't disrupt the existing protocol we have put in place to protect the people. And I think that should be our fundamental goal. We shouldn't move it away from protection to getting vaccine. Vaccine is just an option to arrive at that, and we should make sure that we always focus on the goal. And I think finally, I'll say that I think, you know, there are differences in the economies and different contexts. So our ability to respond to this virus will be different. Okay, but I believe that developing countries have done well. I think that I approve what they've done so far, and I think we should keep the momentum, trying to increase the testing, trying to make sure that people observe the social distancing rules and everything. And all these are going to help out. But at the end of it all, we should also try to work within the World Health Organization, trying to make sure that when a vaccine is actually found, it is scaled out across the world, not just for developed countries who can pay. I know United States has already struck a deal to have these vaccines produced and sent to them at a particular point in time. We should make sure that that is not done.
Thank
and
you.
that
Thank
leaders
you.
have to work.
Thank you. I'm afraid and I'm
direction.
sorry that this is where we would draw the curtain. Thank you very much. My guest has been Edmond Yeboah, Dr. Ishmael Reku. Sorry, I struggle with pronouncing your name. And then Mrs. Akosua Jima. My name is Evans Apiakisi. Thank you very much. And I'm sure you had a very wonderful time. And this has been very insightful. We are hoping that a vaccine will be developed by September, as optimistic as Ishmael, or as Edmond and Mrs. Jima, who are more realist and pragmatist and feel we might go about 2-3 more years to get it. But regardless, stay safe, stop the spread of COVID-19, and we implore all governments to follow the important strategies that has been discussed here, and I'm sure the world will be a better place. Thank you very much, and I say goodbye to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.